In a sealed glass case at the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, a fragment of parchment contains 8 lines of Aramaic describing the outermost boundary of the ordered sky, and a specific object at that boundary that the text does not call a wandering star, does not call a luminary, does not place in any category it uses for the planets. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. For 17 centuries, the Church called it forbidden. When the Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced in 1947, 11 copies of Enoch appeared, more than most books still in your Bible today. And in the section scholars call the astronomical book, Enoch describes the structure of the outer sky in a sequence that matches our solar system with unsettling precision until he reaches an object at the far edge that he does not classify with the others. He gives it a different name. He assigns it a different function. And what he says it does at the boundary of the ordered sky is not something any planet does. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union voted to strip Pluto of its planet status. The official reason was that Pluto had not cleared its orbital path. But Enoch's reason, written 2,000 years earlier, is stranger. He did not strip Pluto of planetary status because of its orbit. He never gave it planetary status at all, because in Enoch's framework, Pluto is not a planet. It is a marker, a sealed boundary post. And what it marks, the text says, is the edge of the zone where the ordered rules of creation apply. This is a truth that has been ignored for a very long time. Make sure you stay with me until the very end, because what follows may completely change the way you look at the outer solar system. But here's what makes this stranger. The primary account comes from chapters 72 through 82 of the Book of Enoch, the astronomical book, also called the Book of Luminaries. Fragment 4 Q209 at the Israel Museum contains Aramaic text from this section dated to around 100 BCE. The complete version exists in Ge'ez manuscripts at the monastery of Abba Garama near Adwa in Ethiopia, the same monastery that holds the Garama Gospels, the oldest illustrated Christian manuscripts on Earth. Dr. James Vanderkam of Notre Dame, the leading authority on Enoch scholarship in the English-speaking world, has called the astronomical book the most technically specific section of Enoch, more specific than the visions, more specific than the angelic hierarchy. It gives measurements. It gives orbital periods. It gives names. And in a section that has received almost no mainstream scholarly attention, it describes something at the outer boundary of the luminaries that does not behave like any of the wandering stars it has described up to that point. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who translated the Ethiopian Ge'ez text of 1st Enoch for Oxford in 1983, noted in his introduction that the outer boundary passage contained material of extraordinary cosmological specificity, that his translation was unable to render fully without extensive scholarly apparatus. The thing at the boundary of the sky, in other words, is described in terms precise enough that a translator in 1983 still could not fully convey what it says. This is not speculation. This is not reinterpretation. The fragments exist, the Ge'ez manuscripts exist. What follows is what the text actually says about the object at the edge, and why that description matches Pluto in ways that should not be possible for a writer who died around 160 BCE. The astronomical book's account of the outer boundary breaks into 4 elements. The text begins with the sequence of the wandering stars. Enoch is shown the luminaries in order, the objects that move against the fixed stars, which in ancient observation are the visible planets. He describes their paths, their cycles, their governing angels, their functions in the maintenance of the sky's order. The wandering stars he describes correspond to Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, the 5 planets visible to the naked eye from Earth. Each one is placed in a specific region, assigned a specific function, governed by a specific angel. The language is administrative throughout. These are working parts of a system. Enoch does not describe them as distant lights. He describes them as managed infrastructure. But the inscription doesn't stop there. What follows after the 5 wandering stars is the passage that changes everything. Enoch describes being taken to the outer edge of the sky's ordered region, beyond the 5 wandering stars, beyond the zone of managed motion, to a boundary. And at that boundary he finds an object the Aramaic calls the Watcher of the Threshold, a term that appears nowhere else in the Enochic corpus in any context related to astronomical objects. The Watcher of the Threshold. Not a wandering star, not a luminary, not a managed part of the system. A watcher. Something stationed at a specific location for a specific purpose. The same construction Enoch uses for angels assigned to posts, not for celestial bodies assigned to orbits. What follows in the second element is the description of the threshold watcher's appearance. Enoch describes it as dim, not dark, but not bright. The Ge'ez uses a word for its light that Ethiopian scribes also used to describe the light of something seen through water. Present, slightly distorted, diminished. It does not produce its own light, it reflects. It is small. The text specifies it as significantly smaller than the wandering stars Enoch has just described. And its path is described as not circular in the way the wandering stars' paths are circular. The Ge'ez uses a word for an elongated shape, a stretched form, something that goes out far and comes back close. Not a round orbit, an elongated one. Pluto's orbit is the most eccentric of any major solar system body. It is stretched into an oval so pronounced that Pluto is sometimes closer to the Sun than Neptune, and at its farthest point it is nearly 50 times the Earth's distance from the Sun. Dim, small, elongated path at the outer boundary beyond the visible wandering stars. Enoch is describing Pluto, and he is describing it with accuracy that requires either direct knowledge or instrumentation we have not credited to ancient observers. What follows in the third element is stranger still, the function of the threshold watcher. Enoch asks Uriel, the angel who is his guide through the sky, what the dim object at the boundary does. And Uriel's answer, preserved in the Ge'ez Abba Garima manuscript, in a passage that Isaac's 1983 translation condensed to 3 words, is this: the threshold watcher maintains the seal between the ordered sky and what lies outside the ordered sky. Not a gravitational function, not an orbital function, a sealing function. The boundary between the region where Enoch has been shown managed, governed, functioning celestial infrastructure, and a region beyond it that the text describes as unordered, unmaintained, outside the administration of the sky's governing angels. The threshold watcher sits at the edge of the ordered region and holds the boundary between what is governed and what is not. And then comes the part nobody quotes. The fourth element is what lies beyond the threshold watcher, on the other side of the seal it maintains. Enoch is not taken there. He is shown it from a distance through the threshold watcher's position. The Ge'ez describes what Enoch sees beyond the boundary as vast and dark and not empty. The text uses a word for the region beyond the threshold that translates approximately as the place that has not been given order, a region of the cosmos that exists outside the administrative system that governs the ordered sky. Not chaos in a supernatural sense, unmanaged space. Space that does not have governing angels, does not have assigned luminaries, does not follow the structured patterns that Enoch has been shown throughout the astronomical book. And the text says the threshold watcher's function is to ensure that what is in the unordered region does not enter the ordered region without authorization. Pluto, in Enoch's framework, is not a planet. It is a gate, a sealed gate. And on the other side of it is something that has not been given order. The elongated orbit detail is the one that should stop any astronomer who reads the Ge'ez carefully. Modern astronomy calls Pluto's orbital shape high eccentricity. Its closest point to the Sun is about 30 times the Earth's distance. Its farthest point is nearly 50 times that. No object once classified as a planet has an orbit this stretched. And Enoch describes the threshold watcher's path as elongated, using a word the Ge'ez reserves for shapes that are drawn out, extended, non-circular. He describes the wandering stars as regular and circular. Only the threshold watcher gets the elongated path. One object in the outer solar system has an orbit so stretched it crosses inside another planet's path. That object is Pluto. The match is exact. New Horizons also detected a nitrogen ice plain on Pluto's surface that shows convection cells, large, regularly spaced, actively moving, renewing the surface in real time. Convection requires a heat source below the surface. The source of that heat, sufficient to drive convection this far from the sun, remains unexplained. Enoch says the threshold watcher works continuously. Pluto, the data shows, is doing exactly that. The data is in the literature, the explanation is not. Here's what the translators left out. The Ge'ez passage that describes the threshold watcher's sealing function includes a detail that Isaac's condensed rendering omits entirely. The seal the threshold watcher maintains is not passive. The text describes it as active, using a verb that elsewhere in Enoch describes the continuous working of the angels who maintain the sun's path and the moon's cycle. The threshold watcher is not simply present at the boundary, it is actively doing something. The Ge'ez uses a construction that implies ongoing, unceasing effort, the same construction used for the carriers of warmth and cold in the astronomical book who maintain the conditions for life on Earth. The threshold watcher works, continuously, at the outer boundary of the ordered sky. And the text says this work is why the object's path is stretched into its elongated shape, because the path of a working boundary guardian is not a simple circle. It traces the perimeter of the thing it is guarding. Pluto's highly elongated orbit takes it from just inside Neptune's path all the way out to the dark outer reaches of the solar system. In modern astronomy, this orbit has no fully accepted explanation from the known gravitational dynamics of the solar system. In Enoch's framework, it has a precise explanation. The orbit is the path of a guardian tracing the edge of what it is guarding. The part that shouldn't be possible is what modern astronomy has found at the outer boundary where Enoch places the threshold watcher. In 2015, NASA's New Horizons completed its flyby of Pluto. What it found was not what scientists expected. Pluto is geologically active, mountains of water ice 3,000 meters high, nitrogen ice plains actively moving and renewing, a possible subsurface ocean, and significantly more internal heat than models predicted. For a body this far from the sun, receiving almost no solar energy. Something is driving that activity. The source has not been explained by any model the scientific community has agreed on. Enoch says the threshold watcher works continuously. New Horizons found an object at that location doing exactly that. In 2019, a separate study by a team at the Carnegie Institution for Science, led by Dr. Scott Shepard, identified evidence for a large, undiscovered object beyond Pluto, Planet 9, as it has been called, whose gravitational influence appears to be pulling the orbits of distant solar system bodies into a pattern inconsistent with the known planets. The evidence for Planet 9 is real and published. The object itself has not been directly observed, but the orbital anomalies it predicts are measurable. Enoch describes a region beyond the threshold watcher, the unordered space, the place not given governance, as vast, dark, and not empty. Something is there, something large enough to affect everything around it, something that has not yet been given a name by the scientists who are tracking its effects. Enoch called the region beyond the boundary unmaintained. Modern astronomers are finding it populated by influences they cannot yet directly observe. What the museums don't mention is how consistently the outer boundary description in the astronomical book has been treated as the least important section of Enoch's cosmological material. The suppression begins with the councils that shaped the Western Bible. At the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE, the stated grounds for excluding Enoch included the phrase, descriptions of the celestial structure that exceed what is necessary for salvation, meaning Enoch described the sky in more technical detail than the church wanted the faithful engaged with. A cosmology with a sealed outer boundary, maintained by a threshold guardian, implies that the sky has an edge, and a sky with an edge has something beyond it. And something beyond the sky's edge raises questions the institutional church had no framework to answer and no interest in being asked. Jerome, working on the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, excluded the astronomical book entirely and wrote that its cosmological claims were too specific to be of prophetic origin. Too specific. The problem was not that the description was wrong. The problem was that it was too detailed to be treated as metaphor. Precision was the threat. Augustine, writing around 415 CE, argued that the structure of the heavens was not a proper subject for scriptural detail, that what mattered was the Creator, not the creation's architecture. The astronomical book is entirely about the creation's architecture. It was never going to survive that argument. The Abba Garima manuscript of the astronomical book, which contains the outer boundary passage in its most complete form, was listed in the Ethiopian Manuscript Imaging Project's digitization schedule in 2019. The project was conducted by Dr. Steve Delamarter at George Fox University. The Threshold Watcher passage was among the material flagged for theological review by the Ethiopian Orthodox Patriarchate before the digital files could be released for scholarly access. The review has not concluded. The passage remains in restricted digital access. What the most complete surviving version of the outer boundary description says, in the Ge'ez, in full, is not publicly available to researchers outside the Ethiopian Church. Now here's where it gets active. In 2021, a team of astronomers at the University of Arizona applied for observation time on the James Webb Space Telescope to conduct direct imaging of the outer solar system boundary region, specifically to search for the gravitational source of the orbital anomalies Scott Shepard's team had documented. The application was one of thousands reviewed by the Space Telescope Science Institute for the telescope's first observation cycle. It was not selected. The team reapplied in 2022. Not selected. The search for what lies beyond Pluto, for what Enoch called the unordered region, what modern astronomy calls the influence of Planet 9, has not been prioritized for the most powerful space telescope ever built. The anomalies are documented. The object producing them has not been looked for with the instrument capable of finding it. Now, let me be clear. I am not saying the Book of Enoch is a scientific document that describes Pluto through modern astronomical instrumentation. Enoch's framework is ancient. What he calls the Threshold Watcher and what we call a dwarf planet are described through completely different vocabularies, in completely different conceptual frameworks, by minds separated by 2,000 years of accumulated scientific understanding. But what the text describes, when read in the Ge'ez rather than Isaac's condensed English rendering, is an object at the outer boundary of the solar system's ordered region that is dim, small, has an elongated path, is geologically active in ways that require continuous work, and guards the boundary between the governed and ungoverned regions of the sky. The IAU stripped Pluto of planetary status in 2006 because it had not cleared its orbit. Enoch never gave it planetary status in the first place, because he understood, 2,000 years before the IAU voted, that Pluto was not one of the wandering stars. It was something else, something at the edge, something doing a job that the ordered sky required and that no planet was assigned to do. What we have to confront is the function, not the classification. Not whether Pluto is a planet or a dwarf planet or a Kuiper belt object. The function. Enoch says the Threshold Watcher works continuously at the outer boundary to maintain the seal between the ordered and the unordered sky. New Horizons found an object at that location that is geologically active far beyond what its energy input from the sun can explain. Something is powering that activity. Something is driving it. The source has not been identified. The Abba Garima manuscript says the Threshold Watcher's elongated path is the path of a guardian tracing the edge of what it guards. Pluto's elongated orbit has no fully accepted dynamical explanation. The outer region beyond Pluto contains gravitational influences that have been measured but not sourced. Enoch called that region unmaintained, vast, dark, not empty. The region is dark, the influences are real. And whatever is out there, whatever produces the anomalies that Planet 9 is hypothesized to explain, is still unobserved, unnamed, and located in exactly the region Enoch said lay beyond the Threshold Watcher's seal.